This is who we are. We are diverse people who insisted to stay diverse, sort of like this continent had diverse, people here, different languages, different nations. As you mentioned, we honor those people. The colonizers don't like this diversity, so they want to change it, make it something different. In our case, make it a Jewish state with Jewish culture, Jewish religion, one language, etc. Now, you'd be surprised, but the origin of this is actually here in Australia. The British government hired the services of this guy named Lieutenant Colonel George Gawler, who was governor of South Australia, because he was so good at colonization. They told him, look, see if it's possible to do something similar in this other part of the world, and he gladly took on the mission. And he produced a study, as you can see, it's titled Tranquilization of Syria and the East, Observations and Practical Suggestions in Furtherance of Establishment of Jewish Colonies in Palestine, the most sober and sensible remedy for the miseries of Asiatic Turkey. They used to make the titles of their books and monographs long titles. Now we have titles like this, Popular Resistance in Palestine, 4 words. Or Sharing the Land of Kid, another book of mine. Now, this is the problem that exists now. Now, if you go to a doctor and you have a problem, they look at your history to see if it's a congenital problem, if it existed for decades or all your life. Or is it a new problem, like COVID-19, So in our case, was this part of the world, the so-called Middle East and Western imperialist colonial terminology, I like to call it Western Asia or the Arab world, was this area of the world always problematic or always had problems, conflicts? Answer is decisively no. Before this conflict that started, as you see, with the British idea in the mid-19th century, and some people trace it really to the Balfour Declaration 1917 and then what followed after that. But before this, where was the next conflict? The previous disease, if you want. And you'd have to go back to the Crusaders to find another conflict, which is another conflict that came to us from outside. We have rarely had conflicts that, in fact, I cannot think of one in the past 2,000 years that came from local people fighting each other. We don't have that. We have peace. So it's the patient was healthy all this time, and now we have a problem. This is the problem, right here. It's called Zionism. And what is this Zionism about? Is to take a country, as I said, that's pluralistic, multi-ethnic, multicultural, multi-religious, multilingual, and make it the Jewish state of Israel. It's a simple idea. Some people would say a brilliant idea. Why don't we have states for different religions and different people, white people, Baha'i people, Buddhist people, Jewish people, Christian people? Some people think maybe that's an answer for humanity. We Palestinians didn't think that's a good thing to have, and we thought of this for thousands of years. My ancestors, who happened to be Christian, by the way, fought with fellow Muslims in Palestine against the Crusaders. The Crusaders, who claim allegedly, but it's not true, in the name of Christianity. Why did we fight with the Muslims against the Crusaders? Because the Crusaderism is a political idea. It had nothing to do with Christianity. I mean, these people obviously didn't read what Jesus preached. He didn't preach go conquer and kill and butcher, Literally, when the Crusaders came, the streets of Jerusalem were flowing with blood. And that's what happened with this case of colonialism. That was another case of colonialism in the 12th century. But anyways, Zionism is an idea to make the country a Jewish state that entailed having to remove the native people, the indigenous people of Palestine, and indeed 534 Palestinian villages and towns, you see them on this map, were wiped off the map, the red dots. And this is the ethnic cleansing of Palestine that happened. This didn't happen suddenly, it happened in stages. This is a shrinking map of Palestine that you see on the top. It was inspired actually and drawn first by my son when he was 13 years old, after he saw the shrinking map of the United States, where the Native Americans ended up in these reservations, so-called. But this is not unusual in world history. We saw in South Africa the shrinking map of South Africa with the blacks relegated to what was called Bantustans. So, in brief, on the analogy with the medical analogy, patient history, the patient is healthy, had never had any problems. Symptoms that lead you to diagnosis are very clear. I won't spend too much time on symptoms. I'll say a few things about the environmental symptoms, because that's the focus of this session. But diagnosis is very clear. The third item is diagnosis, settler colonialism. A particular brand of settler colonialism called displacement settler colonialism, which I don't need to lecture you about. You are familiar with it from this continent and what happened to it. This is from another continent, what happened in North America. And the vision of the colonizers of bringing technology, modern agriculture, etc., to those promised lands, shiny city on the hill, manifest destiny for us, etc. And those indigenous people, like their wildebeest, like their buffaloes, are a nuisance, and we have to kill them. They killed 2 to 3 million buffaloes in the process of colonizing the Great Plains of what became known as the United States of America. The symptoms are very clear, but every colonization has some unique features. In our situation, the colonizers are not all British or all this or all that. The colonizers were chosen by the British to be Jewish colonizers. So any Jew in the world is entitled to come and get automatic citizenship and live on stolen Palestinian land, but Palestinians are denied their rights to this land. These are two friends of mine, Ghada Karmi and Alan Siegel, in 1973, and the same two ladies in 2011, illustrating a uniqueness of this particular colonization that involved this situation. In terms of symptoms that are common to all colonizers, there's lots of symptoms. For example, genocide. Genocide is common, and we have had incremental genocide since 1948, which accelerated after October 7, 2023, so now it's accelerated genocide. So far, 160,000 Palestinians were killed. The vast majority of 99% are civilians. This is colonization. Colonization has certain features. It has to do with the desires of colonizers to control natural resources, etc. Why Gaza Strip, for example, is because of the gas fields off of Gaza. Gaza Strip has $200 billion, US dollars, of gas fields right off the coast. And Israel is using these gas fields already and exporting them to Europe to replace Russian gas, which used to flow from North Russia to North Europe via two pipelines, Nord Stream pipelines, which mysteriously exploded by an act of God, of course. We don't know who blew them up. That the intelligence services of all the Western world seem incapable of pinpointing the responsibility. But you know, the Israeli regime has told us what's in plan for them. In fact, Netanyahu articulated in front of the UN in September 2023, a month before October 7, and he articulated it even better on Israeli television in Hebrew, where he said, we're going to become an empire in the Middle East, and we will develop a route from Asia. As you see in this map, he was explaining how Israel will be a pivotal connection between Asia and Europe to replace the Road and Belt Initiative that China is building between China and Europe via unfriendly countries like Afghanistan, Iran, Pakistan, Turkey to Europe. This is for money, for hegemony, for power. It has nothing to do with who controls Gaza or the Islamic resistance movement, Hamas, or any of this stuff. Gaza was a nuisance, basically. The population of Gaza, 2.3 million people in Gaza. Most of them are refugees from 1948. That's, you can see on the map where the Gaza Strip is squeezed into this semi-arid region. It's just a nuisance to have those 2.3 million people, so they should be eliminated. And this plan of elimination existed long before October 7, and Israeli leaders have frequently said what they plan to do with Gaza. And immediately after October 7, this became very public. For example, Yoav Gallant, the so-called defense minister of Israel, said we will deny them food, water, medicine, electricity, everything, because we're not dealing with humans, we're dealing with human animals, or some people translated animal people. But this is what Israeli leaders, one after another, said, that they plan to commit genocide, and their soldiers proceeded to execute these plans of genocide. And so that's how we ended up with children like this, or mass graves like this, or carpet bombing of Gaza is happening here. This is just some lists of names of civilians killed in these bombings. And you can see I just enlarged the Hassouna family. You can see their ages are actually from 1 to 17 years old who were killed in the Hassouna family. The killing of journalists to hide the truth. Israel killed more journalists in Gaza than in all other conflicts on earth in the past 10 years, and that's in the span of 6 months. And this is what's happening daily. I mean, I won't belabor this issue, but this is a symptom of the situation. Destruction of hospitals. Of course, most of the hospitals in Gaza were rendered out of service by intentional Israeli bombings of the hospitals. Mosques and churches, 3 churches were destroyed, 295 mosques. Museums, universities like these, all universities in Gaza were rendered out of service. 90,000 students in higher education were rendered out of service. These are all symptoms of colonization, and it's understandable symptoms of colonization. If you want the land, you don't want the people who are a nuisance for you as colonizers, then the people are dispensable and can be eliminated. The other symptom that very briefly I'll go over is the environmental symptom of colonization, and that